I set my boundaries, and the family had to listen. This Thanksgiving was different.
30 people? In my house? On my peaceful Thanksgiving? I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
You don't want to let the family down, do you? That guilt hit me like a punch to the gut.
She said I was incompetent at a hostess in front of everyone. I wanted to disappear.
I realized I'd been living on everyone else's terms for too long. It was time to say enough.
Thanksgiving was supposed to be my sanctuary, a quiet, cozy day filled with laughter, a few close family members, and the kind of warmth that only a small gathering can bring. I had spent weeks planning the menu, carefully selecting recipes that would please my husband and our 2 kids without turning me into a stressed-out mess. Just the thought of a peaceful day, with pumpkin pie cooling on the counter and soft music playing in the background, made me smile. This year, I was determined to keep it simple. No drama, no chaos, just us. But then, out of nowhere, my mother-in-law dropped a bombshell that shattered my calm like a dropped glass. It was a casual phone call at first, just a quick check-in, or so I thought. Her voice was cheerful, almost too cheerful, when she said, "Darling, I've been thinking this year, why don't you host Thanksgiving dinner, and not just for the usual few? Let's invite everyone. My side, your side, neighbors, friends, I'm talking about 30 people. 30? The word echoed in my mind like a thunderclap. 30 people, in my house, on my day. I remember sitting there, the phone slipping from my hand as my heart pounded in disbelief. 30 people. The thought of cooking for that many, coordinating seating, managing the chaos. It was overwhelming. My peaceful plans, my quiet day, suddenly felt like a distant dream. I could almost see the kitchen in my mind, pots boiling over, the oven packed to the brim, the dining table groaning under the weight of dishes, and me running around, frazzled and exhausted, trying to keep everyone happy. I tried to keep my voice steady, but inside, panic was rising. Mom, 30 people, that's the lot, are you sure? I was thinking something smaller this year. But she was already imagining the grand feast, the laughter of a huge family, the endless plates of food. Oh, sweetheart, it's tradition. Everyone loves Thanksgiving at your place. You're the perfect hostess. Besides, it's the only time we all get together. Her words felt like a gentle trap, wrapped in love but impossible to refuse. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her that my house wasn't big enough, that I was already stretched thin with work and the kids' schedules, that I needed a break. But the guilt was immediate and suffocating. How could I disappoint her? How could I risk the family's feelings? The last thing I wanted was to start a fight or be labeled as the difficult daughter-in-law. So I swallowed the lump in my throat and said, "Okay, Mom, I'll do it." As soon as I hung up, the reality hit me like a tidal wave. How was I going to pull this off? 30 people meant 30 times the food, 30 times the cleanup, 30 times the stress. My mind raced through logistics. Where would everyone sit? How would I cook enough turkey? What about the desserts, the drinks, the decorations? I felt trapped between wanting to keep the peace and knowing this was a recipe for disaster. I glanced around my modest kitchen, suddenly feeling very small in the face of this enormous demand. The quiet, intimate Thanksgiving I had dreamed of was gone. In its place was a looming storm of expectations and obligations. I could almost hear the ticking clock counting down to the day I'd have to face this crowd. And the worst part, I had no idea how to say no without causing a family war. The thought haunted me as I sat there, heart pounding, mind spinning. How could I possibly manage this? Was there even a way out? Or was I doomed to spend the next few weeks drowning in preparations for a dinner I never wanted to host? The peaceful holiday I craved was slipping through my fingers, replaced by a nightmare I wasn't sure I could escape. After that phone call, I thought maybe I could find a way to make this work. Maybe if I set some boundaries early, explained my limits gently, my mother-in-law would understand. I told myself, it's just a conversation. I can handle this, but I was wrong. So very wrong. The next day, I tried to bring it up again, hoping to soften the blow. Mom, I've been thinking. Maybe we could keep the guest list smaller. 30 people is a lot for our house, and I'm worried about the logistics. I tried to sound calm, reasonable, even a little hopeful, but her response was immediate and sharp, like a slap I didn't see coming. Oh, sweetheart, you're always so worried about the logistics. It's just one day, you're strong and you're capable. Besides, everyone's counting on you. You don't want to let the family down. That last part hit me like a punch to the gut. You don't want to let the family down. The guilt was a heavy chain tightening around my chest. I could almost hear the unspoken message. If you say no, you're selfish. You're the problem. I tried again, explaining how much I already had on my plate: work deadlines, the kids' school events, and the house that needed constant attention. But every excuse was met with a sigh, a reminder of tradition, or a pointed comment about how family is everything. And then the subtle manipulation began. You know, your husband and I have been talking. We think it's important for the kids to see the whole family together. It's good for them. Suddenly, my husband was involved, and I felt even more cornered. I wasn't just disappointing my mother-in-law anymore. I was risking upsetting my husband and fracturing the family. As the days passed, the pressure didn't ease, it intensified. Family members started chiming in, some siding with my mother-in-law, others quietly sympathizing with me but unwilling to speak up. I felt like I was standing alone in the middle of a storm, trying to hold onto my sanity while everyone else watched. At family dinners and casual phone calls, the topic kept coming up. Are you ready for the big dinner? We're all so excited to see you host this year. It's going to be the best Thanksgiving ever. The words were meant to be encouraging, but to me, they felt like nails being hammered into a coffin of my peace. I found myself shrinking, retreating into silence when the subject came up. I wanted harmony, I craved it, but the more I tried to keep the peace, the more suffocated I felt. The contrast between my desire for a calm, loving holiday and the mounting pressure was unbearable. One afternoon, I caught my husband watching me with a mix of concern and frustration. Maybe you should just go along with it, he said quietly. It's easier than fighting everyone. His words stung. Was I really expected to sacrifice my well-being just to avoid conflict? But the thought of giving in made my chest tighten. What would I be giving up? My time, my energy, my voice. And worse, would I lose my family's respect if I stood my ground? The fear of being labeled difficult, ungrateful, or selfish gnawed at me. I started to question everything. Was I overreacting? Was I being unreasonable? Or was this pressure a test of how much I was willing to endure for the sake of family? The emotional tug-of-war left me exhausted and confused. Every night I lay awake, the weight of the upcoming Thanksgiving pressing down on me like a dark cloud. I imagined the chaos, the endless cooking, the crowded rooms, the forced smiles, and I wondered if I could survive it without losing myself. The more I tried to find a way out, the more trapped I felt. The walls were closing in, and I was running out of options. The question that haunted me most was this: could I say no and still keep my family intact? Because deep down, I knew that standing up for myself might come at a cost. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to pay the price. The day everything came crashing down started like any other, but by the time it ended, I felt like I'd been stripped bare, emotionally exposed and utterly defeated. It was a family brunch, meant to be a casual gathering before the Thanksgiving chaos began. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I showed up with a smile and a positive attitude, things would ease up. Instead, it turned into the moment I'd been dreading, the moment my mother-in-law humiliated me in front of everyone. We were all sitting around the table, the clatter of plates and soft chatter filling the room, when she suddenly launched into a tirade about my incompetence as a hostess. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the noise like a knife. Honestly, I don't know how you expect to handle Thanksgiving this year. You can barely keep your own house in order, and now you're supposed to feed 30 people. It's laughable. The room fell silent. I could feel every eye on me, the weight of their judgment pressing down like a physical force. My cheeks burned with humiliation, and my throat tightened so much I could barely breathe. I wanted to disappear, to vanish into the floor beneath me. But what hurt the most wasn't just the words. It was the truth behind them. For years, I had been the one who bent over backward to keep the peace, to make everyone happy, to sacrifice my own needs for the sake of the family. I had cooked countless meals, cleaned up endless messes, and swallowed my own frustrations just to avoid conflict. And yet here I was, being told I wasn't good enough. As the brunch continued, I sat there, numb, replaying every moment in my head. I thought about all the times I had said yes when I wanted to say no, all the holidays I had spent exhausted and overwhelmed, pretending everything was fine, all the sacrifices I had made quietly, hoping they would be appreciated or at least noticed, but they weren't. Not really. That afternoon, something inside me shifted. The humiliation, the exhaustion, the relentless pressure. It all boiled over into a fierce, burning resolve. I realized I had been living my life on everyone else's terms for far too long. I had been the family's caretaker, the peacekeeper, the one who always gave in. But who was taking care of me? Who was standing up for me? I looked around the room again, this time with new eyes. I saw the faces of my family members, some sympathetic, some indifferent, some even amused by the drama. And I understood that if I didn't change something, this cycle would never end. I would always be the one who got trampled, the one who lost herself trying to keep everyone else happy. That night, after everyone had left, I sat alone in my quiet kitchen, the weight of the day settling over me like a heavy blanket. I thought about my children and the example I wanted to set for them. Was this the kind of strength I wanted them to see? A woman who let herself be pushed around, who sacrificed her own happiness to avoid conflict. No, I knew then that something had to give. I couldn't keep living in fear of disappointing others. I couldn't keep letting guilt and obligation dictate my life. I had to find the courage to fight back, not with anger or bitterness, but with clear boundaries and self-respect. But the question that lingered in my mind was terrifying. Could I really do it? Could I finally stand up to my mother-in-law, to the family expectations, to the pressure that had been suffocating me for so long? Could I risk the fallout, the possible backlash, the family drama that might come with saying no? The answer wasn't clear yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a spark of strength that told me maybe, just maybe, I could reclaim my life. As I wiped away the tears that had silently fallen, I made a silent promise to myself. This Thanksgiving would be different. I would no longer be the victim of family demands. I would find a way to protect my peace, even if it meant shaking up the entire family dynamic. Because sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought at home, and sometimes the most powerful victories come from simply saying, enough. Could I finally find the courage to fight back? That question echoed in my mind as I prepared for the storm ahead. And deep down, I knew the answer would change everything. After that humiliating brunch and the crushing weight of expectations pressing down on me, I knew I couldn't just keep saying yes and hope for the best. I needed a plan, a smart, strategic way out of this Thanksgiving nightmare without turning the family into a battlefield. But how do you say no to 30 people expecting a feast without starting a war? That was the question that kept me awake at night. I started by quietly reaching out to a few trusted allies. My husband, of course, but also my sister-in-law and a couple of close friends who knew the family dynamics well. I needed backup, someone who understood the pressure I was under and could help me navigate the minefield. My husband was hesitant at first. "You don't want to upset my mom," he warned, but I was firm. "I'm not trying to upset anyone. I just want to survive Thanksgiving without losing my mind." He finally agreed to help, promising to talk to his mother and soften the blow if needed. Next, I began crafting my excuses plausible, reasonable, and just vague enough to keep the peace. I told my mother-in-law that the house was undergoing some unexpected repairs, that the oven was acting up, and that the kids' school had suddenly scheduled a big event that day. Each excuse was carefully timed and delivered with just enough hesitation to sound genuine. But I knew excuses alone wouldn't be enough. I needed to shift the responsibility back to her without making it obvious. So I started planting seeds of doubt about the logistics. "Mom, have you thought about how you'll manage seating for so many people? Maybe the community center or a restaurant could handle a crowd that size better than my little house." She scoffed at first, but I could tell the idea was sinking in. I even suggested she take charge of the guest list, subtly implying that she was better equipped to handle the invitations and RSVPs. It was a delicate dance, too much pushback, and I'd be the villain. Too little, and I'd be stuck with the chaos. Meanwhile, I enlisted my sister-in-law to casually mention how stressful hosting such a large group could be, sharing stories of her own Thanksgiving disasters. It was like having a secret weapon in my corner, someone who could validate my feelings without making it seem like I was complaining. As the days ticked closer to Thanksgiving, I kept up the charade, balancing honesty with diplomacy. I even started planning a small, intimate dinner for just my immediate family on the actual day, making sure to invite my husband and kids to keep the mood light and hopeful. But the real test was yet to come. Would my mother-in-law buy into the plan, or would she see through it and push harder? The suspense was unbearable. Every phone call, every text message felt like walking a tightrope. I had to be careful not to reveal too much, but also firm enough to keep her from taking over. One afternoon, she called again, her tone a little softer but still insistent. "Have you finalized the menu yet? I'm so excited to help." I smiled to myself, knowing I had to keep up appearances. "Actually, Mom, I was thinking it might be better if you took the lead this year. You know the family better, and I'm worried I won't do everyone justice." There was a pause on the other end, and then a reluctant, "Well, maybe you're right." I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head. I felt a surge of triumph, but kept my voice calm. "Why don't we work together to make it special? You handle the guest list and the main dishes, and I'll take care of the kids and the desserts. That way, we both get to enjoy the day without stress." It was a perfect compromise, or so I hoped. Behind the scenes, I was already planning my escape route. I booked a last-minute weekend getaway for my little family, a quiet retreat just a few hours away. It was my reward, my sanctuary, and my way of reclaiming the holiday on my own terms. The final piece of the puzzle was timing. I made sure to reveal the getaway plans only after my mother-in-law had agreed to take on most of the hosting duties. That way, it wouldn't seem like I was running away, but rather making a thoughtful choice for my family's well-being. As Thanksgiving approached, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Would my plan work, or would it backfire spectacularly? Would I be seen as the clever daughter-in-law who saved her sanity, or the troublemaker who ruined the holiday? I kept reminding myself that this wasn't just about avoiding a stressful dinner. It was about standing up for myself, setting boundaries, and finally taking control of my life. And no matter what happened next, I was ready to face it head on. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a strange mix of calm and tension hanging in the air. I woke up early, heart pounding, knowing this was the day everything would come to a head. The house was quiet, the usual buzz of holiday preparation replaced by a heavy silence that felt almost like the calm before a storm. I had done everything I could to prepare. My escape plan was in motion, my husband was on my side, and I had even managed to keep the kids blissfully unaware of the brewing family drama. But as the hours ticked by, it became clear that my mother-in-law was not going to let this go quietly. The moment she realized I wasn't going to host the massive dinner, her disappointment turned into something sharper: anger, frustration, and a sense of betrayal that she wore like armor. It started with a pointed text early that morning. "I don't understand why you're backing out now, after all the promises." I didn't respond immediately, knowing that any reply would only fuel the fire. But when she arrived at the house later that afternoon, the tension was palpable. She walked in with that familiar, sharp gaze, the one that always made me feel like I was being sized up and found wanting. "So, this is it," she said, voice dripping with disbelief. "You're really going to let me handle everything, after all the fuss?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Yes, Mom, I think it's best this way. You know the family better, and I want to make sure everyone feels welcome." Her eyes narrowed. "You're just running away, leaving me to do all the work." "No," I said firmly, meeting her gaze. "I'm choosing to take care of my family in a way that works for us. I'm not running away. I'm setting boundaries." The room seemed to hold its breath. Then, unexpectedly, my sister-in-law stepped forward. "Honestly, I think this is a good idea. Hosting 30 people is a huge job. It's okay to ask for help." I glanced at my husband, who gave me a small, encouraging nod. The support was subtle but powerful, but my mother-in-law wasn't finished. "You think you can just walk away from family traditions, from your responsibilities?" I shook my head, feeling a surge of strength I hadn't known I had. Family isn't about forcing someone to do something they can't handle. It's about respect and understanding. I've spent years trying to keep everyone happy, but I'm tired of losing myself in process. Her face twisted with a mix of anger and something else, maybe regret, or even a flicker of understanding. The room was silent again, but this time it felt different. The tension was still there, but beneath it was a crack in the armor she wore so tightly. Then, one by one, other family members began to speak up. My cousin mentioned how stressful last year's dinner had been, how everyone had noticed I was overwhelmed. My aunt quietly admitted she had been worried about the size of the gathering all along. Even my father-in-law, usually quiet and reserved, nodded in agreement that maybe it was time to rethink the tradition. It was like a dam breaking. The family, who had seemed so united behind my mother-in-law's demands, was starting to see things from my perspective. The emotional contrast between the old, rigid expectations and this new, more compassionate understanding was striking. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I stayed grounded. This wasn't about winning a battle. It was about reclaiming my peace and setting a new course for our family. As the afternoon wore on, the atmosphere shifted. My mother-in-law, though still visibly upset, began to soften. She even offered to help with the smaller dinner I was hosting for my immediate family later that evening. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. By the time the first guests arrived for my quiet dinner, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in weeks. The kids were laughing, my husband was relaxed, and I was finally able to enjoy the holiday on my own terms. But the question still lingered in the back of my mind. Who had really come out on top in this family battle? Was it me for standing up and refusing to be crushed by impossible expectations? Was it my mother-in-law for holding onto tradition and family ties? Or was it all of us for finding a way to grow, to listen, and to change? Whatever the answer, I knew one thing for sure. This Thanksgiving was unlike any other. It was the day I stopped being a victim and started being the author of my own story, and that made all the difference. In the days following that intense Thanksgiving showdown, the house finally felt like my own again. The storm of expectations, guilt, and tension that had hung over me for weeks began to lift, replaced by a quiet sense of relief and, surprisingly, respect. The family was still adjusting to the new dynamic, one where I wasn't the default hostess for every big event, and where my boundaries were no longer invisible or ignored. At first, there were awkward moments. A few relatives seemed unsure how to act around me, as if I'd suddenly become a different person. But gradually, those moments gave way to genuine conversations. My mother-in-law, while still a bit guarded, started to acknowledge my efforts in a way she hadn't before. She even complimented the small dinner I hosted for my immediate family, admitting it was nice to see everyone relaxed and happy. That simple acknowledgement meant more than I expected. It was a sign that change was possible, that respect could grow from honesty and courage. I realized that setting boundaries wasn't about shutting people out or causing drama. It was about protecting my well-being so I could be present and joyful, not just for myself, but for everyone I cared about. Reflecting on everything, I saw how much I had grown. For years, I had been the family's caretaker, the one who said yes to avoid conflict, even when it drained me. But now I was learning to say no without fear, to prioritize my needs alongside others, and to stand firm in my truth. That kind of strength wasn't selfish, it was necessary. I also noticed how this shift affected my children. They saw me setting limits, speaking up, and choosing peace over perfection. I hoped that by watching me, they would learn to value their own boundaries and self-care too. Because family traditions aren't just about gatherings and meals, they're about the lessons we pass down. As the weeks went by, the family began to embrace a new way of celebrating. Smaller, more manageable gatherings became the norm, and the pressure to host massive events eased. It wasn't perfect. Old habits die hard, but the change was real, and it felt good. I want to share this with you because I know so many of us have been there, feeling overwhelmed by family expectations, trapped by guilt, and afraid to speak up. But here's the truth. You don't have to carry that burden alone. Setting boundaries is an act of love for yourself and for those around you. If you've ever had to stand up to family pressure, I'd love to hear your story. How did you find the courage? What did you learn? Sharing our experiences helps us build a community where we support and empower each other. Could this be the start of a healthier family tradition for all of us? One where respect, understanding, and self-care come first. I believe it can, and I believe that when we choose to protect our peace, we open the door to deeper, more meaningful connections. So here's to new beginnings, to saying enough when we need to, and to creating the kind of family life that nourishes our hearts as much as our stomachs. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it inspires you to find your own strength and to never be afraid to stand up for yourself, because you deserve it.